Most of the time we're caught up in a particular mood. And this mood drives us to seek some kind of distraction. It also inclines us to look at things in a particular way, depending on our mood. Depending on our mood, we foster particular notions about ourselves, about the world around us. Sometimes this is all very pleasant, but most of the time it's uncomfortable, at least. And in fact, in the Indian spiritual traditions, they would say that this state of affairs is characterized by sorrow, by suffering. What's inherent in this situation is that we're missing the fundamental factor. In our involvement with our moods, with our habitual moods, our basic tendencies, our basic seeking for distractions, our fostering certain notions, what's inherent in all that is our overlooking the fundamental fact of our own awareness, consciousness. What's your reaction when I point this out? If you're familiar with this teaching, then you're probably okay with it. But if you're not familiar with it, then you might find I'm getting a little bit vague now, that you're with me up to this point that I mentioned awareness or consciousness. It's not solid enough to focus on, is it? And even if it were something which you could focus on, it doesn't sound very exciting. It's not something you want to pursue any interest in. And this is a situation at large, isn't it? Especially with a lot of scientists. At best, they see it as the icing on the cake after millions of years of evolution. Something completely dependent on our body, on matter, on the brain. But many intelligent people will argue that there's no such thing. There's no such thing as consciousness. It's a very hard thing to define. I have an encyclopedia of philosophy, and it says consciousness evades definition, which is of great significance. But this is what we need to do. We need to look at our own awareness. We need to look at our own consciousness. We need to explore its ramifications. This is spiritual practice. It's not really spiritual at all, it's entirely rational. It's acknowledging the situation. It's acknowledging the reality of awareness. It's appreciating awareness and its significance. It's not something that should be swept under the carpet. It's not something that should be overlooked. It's fundamental to everything. Vasistha continued. The infinite consciousness alone shines as this world appearance. It shines. It throws light. It throws light on existence. It throws light on everything that appears. Why is this world appearance visible? It's not visible because there's light reflecting off objects. It's visible because there's awareness. How can it perish? How can awareness perish? You might say, well, it'll perish when you die. Well, that's just a hypothesis, isn't it? That's not the reality of the immediate moment. There's always awareness going on. We need to look at that awareness as you directly experience it right now, and you'll see that it's got an imperishable quality to it. There is no possibility for the existence of another other than consciousness. This is all there is. Right here, right now, this awareness. Examine it, look at it. Be aware of your own awareness. When the body perishes, consciousness does not perish. There's only a problem with this if you think that the body is the reality. If you think the body is what is real and consciousness is just a little bit of icing on the cake. But it's only through awareness that we can say that we've got a body. If it is said that consciousness ceases when the body perishes, then it is a matter for rejoicing, as there is cessation of samsara and sorrow. Well, this doesn't really help much, does it? It assumes a rather negative point of view of life. But this is what many people would say nowadays, isn't it? That consciousness ceases when the body ceases. If it is said that consciousness exists as long as the body exists, how is it that the dead body is not conscious? I mean, this is what the scientists will have to figure out, isn't it? What's the mechanism of consciousness? If they believe that consciousness is dependent on the body, why does consciousness apparently disappear when the body dies? What is that factor in a dead body which directly affects consciousness? The whole premise of the question is wrong, really, isn't it? All these arguments are not valid. The infinite consciousness alone is real, and whatever it wishes to experience, it does experience as existence, because there is no obstruction to the realization of its notions. Its notions are what it wishes to experience. We have our notions. That's what our consciousness is identifying with, and these become our reality. The world has never been created. What is the infinite consciousness. We've got the notion of a world out there. We've got the notion of a world having come into being at some point. But these are just notions in consciousness. So what is this consciousness? And consciousness by its nature is infinite. It allows an infinite variety of things to come into it. Things which are of its own essential nature. This consciousness itself wishes to experience its infinite potencies. Consciousness wants to fill itself. This is its voracious aspect. It knows itself when it is aware of itself, and it is ignorant of itself when it is unaware of itself. Therefore, even knowledge and ignorance are pure consciousness, and there is no such division in truth. Hence, one should engage oneself seriously in the realization of the self. Self-knowledge bestows on one the best of both worlds. This self is consciousness. So stop overlooking it. Look into yourself, look into awareness, look into your own consciousness, look into your attention. Now there's a more focused term, isn't it? Attention. What is the nature of your attention? Look into it. Examine its implications.